College football is going through a lot of changes. And when you want to properly address them, you want to have an expert on hand. And today is one of the best. It's an honor for me to have him on my show. He's a friend. He is a brilliant professional. Ladies and gentlemen, the voice of college football, Mark Rogers. Mark, thanks for coming on my show.
Hey, Brian. Good to see you. Good to be here. And absolutely, it's always been a pleasure to have you on. We've always had a good time. Haven't always known what you were just about to say, but that's a good thing because it keeps things going, keeps things lively.
Well, especially with Bobby Durkins. But for anyone watching, of course, this is the Not Bobby Durkins Show. I'm Brian Knight. I'm not Bobby Durkins, at least not right now. So let's dive right into this. Mark, you have had an incredible career covering sports and college football. So here's a softball, but I think it's a great softball to toss to you. In the entirety of your career covering college football, have you ever seen this much change in relatively a short amount of time?
Easy answer. Answer is no. So this has just been crazy, and I'll put it in some kind of perspective that a few days ago was having a conversation on one of my shows. I lose track because I record and do so many live streams during the day, but one of the shows, and I just kind of went through, in this particular instance, the Big Ten and major changes throughout the decades and the years in the Big Ten. And you basically had something happen every 10 or 12 years by itself. The Big Ten forms its own television network. The Big Ten expands with Penn State in the early 90s. The Big Ten forges ahead with instant replay to set the stage for everybody else jumping on board. All these things were major groundbreaking changes that affected college football's landscape, but they would happen, and then we'd have relative peace for 10 or 12 years, and then something else would happen or another major decision would be made. In the last 3 years, NIL, transfer portal, college football realignment, and the speculation of more and more lasting realignment. The realignment that we're seeing now and is being forecasted is more in the range of cataclysmic change to the sport, changing the landscape of the sport. In the past, it's been, okay, a particular university or pair of universities determined, okay, this is a good move for us. They're going to leave this conference and move on. Yes, there have been ultimately, after that's happened over the course of years, changes to and the eventual demise to the Big East, for example, and the ACC expanding to 14. But this just, the geographic boundaries of the sport being completely annihilated, that's not ever happened before. If we were going to talk about expansion, you and I, Brian, even 5 years ago, that would have been one of the first tenets we would have set down was, well, USC's not going to the Big Ten. They're on the West Coast. We think geographically, and still I've got to catch myself and catch other people that I have conversations with to say, is it a factor? It's like 8th or 9th on the list now. It's pretty much disregarded. So even the geography of the sport, which pains me because I think there's a certain fabric to the sport that makes college football different than the other sports, that's tied to culture and ways of life, the food you eat, the music you listen to, the red and the blue. All of that is tied to certain areas of the country that has permeated the college football in a good way to give it character. Well, that's being destroyed as well.
Mark, you're an Ohio State Buckeye fan, and I want to ask you, as taking away the Mark Rogers voice of college football, if we can for a second, as an Ohio State fan, how weird is it thinking about USC? I mean, you talked about that, but that's really weird.
So I don't like it for all the reasons I just stated and many more. I don't like what's happening to college football. But I got to admit, Am I excited about the matchups that have been released over the last week? We heard from the SEC yesterday with Texas and Oklahoma and what that's going to do to their format going forward in 2024 and beyond, and the matchups that will create. And for the Big Ten, they made their big announcement for 2024 and 5 last week. The matchups to think about: Penn State going out to the Rose Bowl to play UCLA, USC coming to Ohio State to play, all those various matchups. Shoot, I'm a nerd and a geek to the point that I'm excited to watch UCLA and Illinois play. So just matchups that we never see, or takes generations for these schools to get together to see them on a regular basis. I'm excited for that. And then the Texas-Oklahoma dynamic in the SEC, puts Texas and Arkansas back together, Texas and Texas A&M back together, and then creates this bevy of blue bloods that will face, I made a comment to somebody yesterday on our Oklahoma show that for some reason this is going to hit me a little bit different in the SEC than the Big Ten. When I watch Oklahoma play, fill in the blank, LSU, I'm going to have to remind myself, even though this is 2 years in the making, 2.5 years at the time that they'll finally hit the field in the fall of 24. Oh, yeah, this is a conference game. Oklahoma and Texas's schedule that first season, to me, is going to feel, I know it, it's going to feel like they're playing nothing but a bunch of non-conference games.
The traditionalists like you and I, there's a major friction there, like you pointed out earlier, because I'm your card-carrying Southern boy, Southern football fan. And to see this realignment, it really does something to my psyche. But my question to you, because of these realignments, do you really believe that we're going to see better football and better results? Or do you think that's something that is slowly being pandered to us, but in the end, it's going to be kind of like when Miami, Virginia Tech, and Syracuse joined the ACC, and it was like, oh, we're going to have a great league. Who knew that those 3 schools were going to go down the drain?
If better football equals the quality of play on the field, getting closer to NFL quality of play, the answer would be yes, because we are moving toward casting off the lower echelon of the sport. We're nowhere near there now logistically, but we see it moving in that direction. Yeah, when you put Oklahoma and Texas in a league that contains the teams that are there in the SEC and do likewise with USC and UCLA in the Big Ten, and they're playing more often, you're creating better matchups more frequently. So there will be a better level of play. And if we keep moving in this direction, as many believe we will, I'm not predicting it, but I'm leaning in that direction, 70-30, that we're going to continue to blow up these 2 mega conferences. I think basically, Brian, that the 2 components that are going to continue to move expansion and realignment into the future is that the Big Ten and the SEC have their the field is open to them to take whomever they want, because everybody wants to be in one of those 2 conferences. Therefore, it's just a clear evaluation. We're looking at this school, their athletics program, their football program. Do they bring value to us? And I think that's a dollar evaluation of, okay, when we add them to the TV contract and then redistribute, do they increase the total revenue to the point that it gets redistributed in our favor and in our school's favor? But I also think it's a more nuanced approach than that. Okay, we can sacrifice $1.5 million per team because they're not going to bring enough to increase the TV contract. But this makes sense in so many ways. TV markets and just landscape and recruiting territory, et cetera, that we bring them in. It's a really good school, whether that's a Stanford or a Miami or a Notre Dame. We bring them in because it's a great school. I think that's the one inertia of this realignment, is just the SEC and the Big Ten assessing the field and saying, okay, let's go get them or that pair. Then the other one is just a counter punch, because this is how it started. The SEC is already the best conference. on the field. The Big Ten has matched it in terms of revenue and rear ends in the seats and eyeballs on the TVs. But on the field, it's the SEC. They add Texas, Oklahoma in the summer of 22. Well, the Big Ten counters with USC, UCLA. So there could be that punch, counter punch dynamic continue as well. But I think it equals better football because you've got better teams playing more frequently.
Do you see a scenario where some of the lesser teams, such as Vanderbilt in the SEC, whether I like it or not, the SEC is the SEC. They are incredible. They've won multiple championships. Do you see a scenario where eventually, as these super conferences are put together, where they're looking at Vanderbilt and saying, thanks, but no thanks. It's time to go. You really don't fit this super conference, super talented football league that we're building?
I don't want to think it's going to happen, but it would only make sense. All of this is being done for business reasons. And if you're going to take from another conference, like the Big Ten and the Pac-12 have been partners for years and years and years in their Rose Bowl agreement and in other ways that they've done business from a academic standpoint. There's a lot of synergy there academically. Well, the Big Ten just took 2 schools from the Pac-12. So yeah, does it get to a point where, we're going to look at the schools that just don't carry their weight on TV, in the stands? Can't answer that question, but it would only make sense that that's part of the cost ratio, that there's going to be analysis to say Rutgers buy, Vanderbilt buy. I don't think that's anytime soon, but if this continues in this direction.
Yeah, that is something that really sticks out to me because, of course, the ACC is anemic at this point. There's Clemson, even though Clemson's had a questionable few years. Of course, we've seen the great recruiting and the great hiring recently. Of course, the commitments haven't signed yet, but there's a big buzz with Clemson. Florida State, there's a lot of questions surrounding them. But then after that, other than individual talents on team, we're seeing a drop-off there. With that said, there's times when Clemson plays teams, especially when they've been incredible, like with Trevor Lawrence. I was sitting there going, man, I don't even want to watch this game. And I agree with you. I think it's going to come to that point. We are doing a short video for everyone who is watching. Mark's very busy, and I appreciate him coming on the show. So I'm going to move a little quicker here because I want to hear his thoughts. Mark, NIL, the transfer portal. We've got a crazy situation on our hands. We have people crying about paying players, the way those players are being paid. Do you see an end to this? Do you see a cap? What do you see coming out of this mess?
Well, I'm going to put a cap on our previous portion of this conversation and should have mentioned this, that I truly can't imagine this landing in a good place for college football from a cultural standpoint, from the standpoint of what's good for the masses, what's good for the entirety of the sport, without a governing body to rule the sport, to govern the sport, or a commissioner. Because just look at the NFL as a model. The NFL doesn't make decisions that's good for, the NFC East isn't making its own decisions and the AFC South making completely separate set of decisions. They work together for the good of the entire organization, the entire NFL. Well, rightfully so, each conference commissioner, they're paid to make decisions for their conference. Therefore, they're going to act in the best interest of their conference, not the landscape of college football. So credit to Greg Sankey with the SEC and Kevin Warren and now Tony Petitti with the Big Ten. They're acting on behalf of their conferences and doing a good job of scarfing up territory in schools, but that's not good for college football, I don't believe. So until we get to a place where there's a governing body or a commissioner, and I would think that the conferences themselves would have to collaborate, cooperate, and decide together how that would look. And to get those 4 or 5 conferences together to do that, good luck. So it's going to continue to be a wild, wild west. Now, as that transfers to NIL and the transfer portal, this is where my values and beliefs clash with what I believe is good for the game. Do I want players to have the right as student athletes, just like any other student, to move wherever they would like and go to school and play for whomever they would like at any point, to be free in this country, to move wherever they would like and go to school and work? Absolutely. I am for total freedom of choice. However, it's not good for the sport. It's just not good for the sport. I think that one of the tenets of this game is loyalty. There is loyalty in this sport between fans and their team, unlike anything in American sports, I believe. And that's one of the reasons why I love college football. And college football fans take great pride when they're watching an NFL game and the players announce what schools they went to. And in the past, it was always, well, that was the only school they went to. And they will forever be a Clemson Tiger. They will forever be an Ohio State Buckeye. That's gone right now. And then we're going to see it reflected on those NFL broadcasts in the future. And when the fans don't have the loyalty from the players, they're going to tend to not have the loyalty for the teams that they had in the past. You know, Major League Baseball still thrives as a business, but does it thrive on the American landscape like it did 50 years ago? Not even close. It's a blip on the radar. And it once was right there with the NFL. And I think much of that has to do with free agency and player movement and the lack of loyalty from the players, and rightfully so. They can do whatever they want. They're free to choose. Hey, if I wanted to leave my job at any time, I could get up and leave. Did I have a loyalty to ESPN? Yeah, as long as they were paying me more than I thought I could get anywhere else, then I'd go somewhere else and work for Fox Sports or somewhere. So I get it from the personal choice standpoint, but it's harmful to the sport. And, you know, we're seeing players that are leaving schools that they haven't even played for yet. I've seen 2 or 3 players this week that transferred after last season that are now transferring again. They basically went through a spring practice. I don't like it here. Let's keep moving on. So, and then the NIL, it's the same thing. And I just can't believe that there was no one that was forward thinking enough, that had the power and authority and the initiative to take hold of this. Because I remember, Brian, shooting a video 10 or 11 years ago when Johnny Manziel was presumed to have signed autographs and made money, and the NCAA made one of their typically ridiculous, stupid decisions to suspend him for the first half of the game, but also say that we didn't find enough evidence. So they punished him anyway, but because they knew what he did, but they couldn't prove it. And I produced a video. This was like in 2012 to say, okay, this is on the horizon. What is the NCAA going to do about it? Well, they didn't do anything about it. And now we've got a wild, wild west. So I certainly believe that these players, not that they should be paid, because I still believe in the college process. I still believe in being student athletes, but I believe that they should have the opportunity to earn money. Just like, hey, if we've got 15-year-olds running around on TikTok doing stupid dance moves, making money, then these players should be given that right, just like anyone in America, to earn money, name, image, and likeness. So I'm all for that. But again, as a whole, I think it's hurting the sport.
You said that very well there. And it's a thought that you and I have talked about off air before. And then I've heard you talk about on your show, as well as with other people. I've had this conversation. We knew this was coming. Somebody allowed it. We know who allowed the NIL deals to go through. It was the very few people who was supposed to prepare for it. and they didn't. And so it's very odd. Going back to your point about player loyalty, I agree with you 100%. Come and go as you please. It does ruin some things. JT Daniels, a great recruit coming out of high school, played for Southern Cal, Georgia, West Virginia, and now he's about to play for Rice. So I'm gonna jump into my team, and I have to ask you about this with your expertise and the finger that you have on the pulse of college football. Clemson, is it fair to say that Clemson has maybe lost a little bit of steam in the past few years, but maybe with the hire of Garrett Riley, maybe it's starting to come back? What do you see from an outsider looking in?
So I tend to be measured. I don't overreact. So when a Clemson rips off the dynasty that it did, at whatever point you want to mark the beginning of it, in terms of championships or championship play, 2015 all the way through 2020, just because they lose 3 games, I'm not, that the program's a mess. No. However, we've got now 2 seasons in a row. And in a sense, this last season was a little more alarming to me because of the way in which they lost some of these games. The Notre Dame game was ugly.
Oh, yeah.
South Carolina on the scoreboard was not ugly, but it was a game that they hadn't lost in 8 or 9 years. And it was ugly in which the way the game was managed and the mistakes made in the game. And then, of course, Tennessee got away from them. And that was not a rout, but it wasn't competitive. So I do like that Dabo, who has been very structured to promote from within. We're a family, show me your worth and value, be loyal, and I'll be loyal to you, and we'll promote from within, was basically like, okay, offense since Trevor Lawrence left campus has been wrecked and just dysfunctional. Go get the best guy available. Not that he's even available. We'll just go get him. That's what's done in college football these days. That wasn't done years ago as well. We don't have to wait for anybody to be available. Just go get them. And so I do like the Dabo, because I see other college football coaches that have been in certain places. Kirk Ferentz at Iowa comes to mind. He does a really good job, really smart guy. I don't question his integrity and so forth, but I just think he's complacent. He's comfortable. Well, Dabo, maybe I had some thoughts that maybe at a higher level was a little more complacent or getting there, but I think he still has the fire, and he's shown us that he's willing to make a move.
Yeah, I think you've seen some of my videos and heard my comments, and half the Tiger family probably hates my guts for it. But I said that in a much worse way than what you just said. But that was more eloquently put. That's why you're Mark Rogers and I'm not Bobby Durkins. But so we're getting closer to the video, to our time together ending, and I know somebody's going to in the comment section be like, man, you could ask better questions. Yeah, I probably could, but I just want to hear your answers on the overall, just the pulse of college football. 2023 is right around the corner. There were some great stories last year. There were some really good hires. Hugh Freeze being hired at Auburn. I think that's probably the best offseason hire. Who are the teams that you're paying attention to? I'm not asking for the national champion, but who are some teams that you're paying attention to that maybe some people are going, yeah, who cares?
Okay, so we'll get past all the obvious ones. So we're talking about dark horses, wild cards. So let me bring this stat to the forefront here. It hit me, Brian, about 5 years ago in looking at all these preseason publications, Lindy's, Athlon, Street, and Smith's. They're too conservative with their predictions. It hit me. This is 5-6 years ago, and I thought they're basically predicting the same thing to happen this year with a slight tweak here and there as what happened the season before. And I thought, I'm going to start to track this and see how much change there is in college football, because without giving it thought, I think college football doesn't change. Georgia, Ohio State, Alabama, Clemson, they're there, and maybe somebody else jumps up and joins them. That's what it's been for. And that's true. At the elite level, in that very thin line, those haven't changed. Those have generally, that's the playoff era. What's a great stat is that prior to TCU from 2015 through this past season, basically your entire playoff can be summed up, playoff summary of the 9 years of the playoff can be summed up this way. The SEC, Clemson, Ohio State, they have won all the meaningful games. They've won all of them, period. That's end of it right there. However, there's a lot of change from year to year. So my point being, I'm looking at these preseason publications, and they're basically they don't want to go out there and look foolish. I think so they just predict what happened last year and tweak the records a little bit. So I started charting, and I used 3 games as a barometer to say if a particular team increases or decreases their win total from one season to another by at least 3, that seems significant to me. You're 9-3, you drop to 6-6. That's significant. You're 3-9, you jump to 6-6. Significant. So I thought, okay, I'm going to track this from year to year. Last season, I'm sure people would be shocked because every time I ask this, I always get a guess of 8, 9, 12 teams made that kind of jump or that kind of decline from season to season. So from 21 to 22 in the Power 5, those 65 teams, 27 of them either increased in wins by at least 3 or decreased in wins by at least 3. 27 out of 65. So the number's typically not quite that high, but you can count on. So I'm just telling people out there, if they see outrageous predictions from me, when I get around to it, I'm trying to be a visionary here. I'm trying to predict, not just be safe and everything's going to stay the same, because a third of the teams in the Power 5 are going to have a significant change in their record. That's what's been the history for the last 5 or 6 years, even though it doesn't really seem like it.
There's a lot of times that I'm reading either Lindy's, Athlon's, etc., and right outside of maybe the top 7-ish, they start getting kind of odd, almost like they're catering to a certain conference or maybe to a certain fan base to try to get them interested by the subscription, maybe pay attention to ESPN. And then we get about 4 weeks in, and then we realize the truth, or we realize that maybe we're not paying attention to teams enough. A team I'm looking at this year is UConn. I know that sounds crazy, but I mean, Jim Mora did a dang good job considering the mess he took over. Tulane was kind of came and went, and really nobody talked about them until they won the Cotton Bowl. So do you see a specific team in mind? Do you have a specific team or teams in mind? A few teams you want to throw out there?
All right. I'm going to throw out, don't laugh because he's been the butt of jokes, and rightfully so, including me. But for as bad as Texas A&M was last year, they really weren't that bad. They lost every game. The results, horrendous, 5-7. There's no excuse for that. Jimbo Fisher continues that. I think the oil money's going to come together, and even if it's 50 or 60 million, we can't put up with this. But they have the talent on that team to do much better than that. So I'm expecting them to elevate. I don't know if that's a championship level. If you're talking about championship level, then Texas is by far, on paper, the best team in the Big 12. Well, how many times have we said that over the last 15 years? But they are better as the number 1 team in the Big 12, with a gap larger than any other best team in any other conference over the rest of the conference. I truly believe that. I think Penn State has a window of opportunity. That might be a heck of a series between Ohio State, Penn State, and Michigan, them all playing each other. Maybe they all win a game against each other, and they've got a 3-way tie at 11-1. That's a possibility. Oregon State continues to surprise people and be a team that could be sneaky good again with nobody paying attention. So look out for them. But yeah, you bring up a great question, because TCU was 5-7 the year before. So who's this year's TCU? Is there a TCU of this year?
Hopefully it won't end like it end with them. We're now at the 30-minute mark. Last question for you. You have so much influence. You have so many viewers. You have now so many channels. What's the next move for Mark Rogers in college, the voice of college football?
The next move is to do it all better and smarter. My life's been in a little bit of transition over the last year plus. So the look, the studio, the set, those sorts of things have been put on hold in regards to what I would like to achieve and like to present. So please listen to the content and listen to the conversation. And what we like to say is best discussion, debate, and analysis. And don't look at the bells and whistles right now. We will get to that at some point. But social media and this YouTube game changes about as much as college football does. So I've got to change with it. I've got to adapt. I can't assume that people are going to watch me just because they've watched me in the past. And that's something that I remind myself of all the time, because people just aren't college football fans, and they're just not sports fans. They're fans of entertainment and latching onto something that catches their attention. So there's a million options out there. So, there's always the new thing out there, like YouTube shorts. Got to do those. Got to do this. Got to do that. I'm not having an impact or a presence right now on Facebook and Instagram. That's got to be coming. Oh man, you're just reminding me of all the things on my to-do list.
All right, let's not get overwhelmed here. And I just want to say this as we're closing down. Everybody, I put the link to Mark's show right below this video. If you're watching this video, you know Mark Rogers. But if not, and you've been living under a bubble, or maybe you've been quarantined since 2020, and you're just now showing up, Mark Rogers, everybody, go there. Even if you're subscribed to him, let him know that you saw me today, or let him know that you saw him on my show. My God, Mark.
We are in the process right now, Brian, of going through each season in the history of college football and reassessing the national championship race and the national champion to determine, should this championship be disputed. So a lot of people have fun with that, and I take some hits for that. But I don't believe that a lot of these national championships are tainted.
Ooh. You'll have to check that out, everybody. Mark Rogers, everyone, thanks for coming on, my friend. And it's always a treat when you get me or Bobby or both of us to come on the show. It's always a good time. So everyone, go check out Mark Rogers. Hit the thumbs up on this. Subscribe. Listen, subscribe. Hit the thumbs up. And hit that little bell. It notifies you. Why? It's free. Yeah, I'm not going through your bank account, so it's free. So go ahead and do that. Mark, thanks for coming on the show. Everybody, look forward to the week 6 of college football preview, overall look on FBS schedules, and we'll go through that as the weeks are continuing. Mark, again, thanks for coming on. Everybody, I'll catch you next time. Take care.